Schneid guy.
So now we're going to talk about the thyroid gland, which makes some very important hormones called T4 and T3. These are collectively referred to as thyroid hormones. The 4 and the 3 refer to the number of iodides attached to the molecule, and these hormones are made from the amino acid tyrosine and iodide. T4 is generally considered a prohormone. It's converted to the more active T3, which exerts primarily all the effects, but we can just collectively call these thyroid hormones for now. The effects of these hormones are widespread all over the body, much like glucocorticoids had widespread effects. We're just going to look at a couple of important effects for now. There are cardiac effects. Upregulation of beta-1 adrenergic receptors. When the thyroid hormone bind to the thyroid hormone receptor on the cardiac cells, it affects the genomic expression of the beta-1 receptor and increases the sensitivity to the sympathetic nervous system or other drugs that act on the beta-1. Also, there's an effect on cells to increase basal metabolic rate or BMR. And so this is why if you have excess thyroid hormones, you can end up with an increased metabolic rate and weight loss and a excited heart, increased heart rate, or you can have hypothyroidism, low thyroid hormones, and you can have decreased basal metabolic rate, weight gain, and a slow heart rate. Those are a couple of examples of excess and low thyroid hormones and the kinds of clinical findings you would see. The receptor for thyroid hormone is the thyroid hormone receptor, which we can abbreviate TR, and it is a intracellular receptor that is sitting in the nucleus because it does not bind heat shock proteins. And there, thyroid hormones, when they go and bind to that receptor, that's how they exert those genomic effects that we were talking about. When we talk about the feedback control, we have the hypothalamus and its release of thyrotropin releasing hormone, or TRH, onto the thyrotropes in the anterior pituitary, which secrete TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Another name for it is thyrotropin, which is why TRH is called thyrotropin releasing hormone. And TSH stimulates the thyroid gland, and we have shown here, we have thyroid hormones. We can put T4 and T3 right in there, and they then have their effects. And more importantly, here in this feedback system, we have thyroid hormone receptors that are in the hypothalamus and pituitary that suppress TRH and TSH in a negative feedback fashion. Also, a couple important points about TSH. TSH is trophic, like many of the anterior pituitary hormones, for their target, and in this case, it's trophic for the thyroid gland. So if you increase TSH receptor activity on the thyroid gland, you get something called a diffuse goiter, which is a diffuse enlargement of the thyroid gland. An important point here is that it's the TSH receptor activity that's important, not necessarily TSH. Because if I had something that was acting like TSH and it was stimulating the TSH receptor, it would also give you the same effects that TSH does, which includes this enlargement of the thyroid gland. I have here a little cartoon of the thyroid gland with the TSH receptor. It's a 7-transmembrane spanning receptor. And when it activates its transduction pathway, you can see that it promotes iodide uptake through this sodium iodide symporter using the sodium gradient to take up iodide, which is important in making thyroid hormones. So you make more thyroid hormones when TSH receptors are activated. But also you have this growth effect that over time the thyroid gland can get enlarged. And so this is an important consideration when we're thinking about disturbances to the feedback loop. We want to know what kind of impact is it going to have on the TSH receptor when we're considering whether or not there's going to be diffuse goiter.